Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Chief Experience Officer Jodi Searl.
Wow, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. All right. Let's get that Vegas energy back up because I didn't see any of you at the bar last night. Very excited to be here this morning. We've spent a lot of time over the last day and a half for some of you who arrived early, talking about change makers and talking about people who are really making a difference in their organizations, in their businesses, and leveraging experience to drive business value. I am very excited this morning to be joined by 3 of our Expy Award winners, which are the exemplifying the best of the work that's happening out there with all of you. And what I'm really excited about to be joined by these 3 incredible ladies this morning is that I've had a couple dozen conversations with many of you, which has been great. I've learned a lot from people. It's been a really great sharing of ideas. But one theme keeps coming true throughout these conversations, and it is, I need to know how. I need to understand what were the steps that people took in order to make experience a true differentiator for their business. So these incredible women are coming out here in just a few minutes to tell you exactly what they've done. They're going to share their learnings. They're going to share their success stories. They might even talk a little bit about what they wish they would have known a couple of years ago. So they're going to share with you all of that experience to give you real tangible ideas of things that you can take back to your organizations and implement right away to be those true change makers. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Stephanie Leheta, Samantha Scott, and Aimee Civera. Hi, ladies. Come on in. Have a seat. Everybody has water. Okay, great. Before we jump into the questions and you start to share your experiences, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourselves? Let's start with you, Stephanie.
So I'm Stephanie, and I lead the enterprise client experience strategy, governance, and design for CIBC. And our mandate is really about driving client-centric, data-driven decisioning that helps strengthen business outcomes.
Love that. And how about you, Samantha?
My name is Samantha Scott. I work for Verizon Business. I've been there for about 15 years, and I lead the customer and employee experience program for the organization.
And hi, I'm Aimee Civera. I lead the engagement technology team at Vanguard for our Workplace Solutions division. And I'm responsible for our marketing technology stack, which means really making sure that we're bringing in solutions to help solve business needs, as well as making sure that we get the most out of the technology that we already have at our disposal. I also have a team of individuals who are focused on the user experience for our B2B public-facing website.
Amazing. So all of you in specific teams within your organizations, but we're going to talk about how you were able to get your messaging around experience mattering to everybody around the organization. So let's start, Stephanie, let's start with you. Let's start with the moment when you realized that what you were doing wasn't quite enough. What were you thinking about from what signal that CX really needs to scale differently, to drive growth, to deliver that business value?
Yeah, Jodi, our signal happened almost a decade ago when we realized that we had really lost sight of our core purpose. Our brand felt somewhat outdated. Our infrastructure really wasn't supporting growth. And when we looked at our client experience performance, we were lagging our peers. The big tell is that everything felt somewhat fragmented, and we knew that that wasn't going to be sustainable to drive growth. That's when our new CEO set a bold new ambition to transform our organization into a modern, relationship-oriented bank. Now, as you can expect, that was a lofty goal. Not only required a complete shift in strategy, but in also how we operated day to day. And so he started by grounding us in a shared purpose of making our clients' ambitions real. And so armed with that, he rallied our senior leadership team around this shared purpose, and he began to act. So we did several things, starting with a brand refresh, but we also began to invest heavily, not only in our front end, but our back end infrastructure. and then really worked deliberately across the enterprise to build a strong culture around that shared purpose. Now, from a CX perspective, we also knew we were going to have to evolve and scale well beyond just fixing moments. We were going to need to build a really mature operating model so that we were listening, learning, and acting from our client insights in a meaningful way, especially in those moments that matter most. I think one of the biggest game changers for us was when we introduced our Client Experience Index. But we didn't just do that, we also tied it to variable comp for all employees, from frontline right to the CEO. That was a real game changer for us, for sure. This index tracks about 20 metrics from across all of our lines of business. And it's important because we actually are measuring what our clients are truly experiencing, but it also forces us to be really honest about our performance and focus our efforts on those improvements. So, the signal was fragmentation, and we rallied around that shared purpose, which has really driven the meaningful transformation and strong performance CIBC now sees today.
Two things that you said there really stick with me. The idea of having that executive level sponsorship. Sounds very simple in its inception, right? But it really is a true game changer. Once you have your C-suite saying experience matters, people pay attention to it. And then I love the story about how you were able to bring everything together that way. The other piece, the other thing that you said, which I thought is really great, is you're looking at 20 different things. It's not just a score. Scores are important. They're things you can track. They're things you can look at. But you're really looking across all of the touch points that your clients have with you, which I think is, it's aspirational really for all of us. So that's really great. I think, Aimee, over to you. When we were talking before we came out on stage, we were talking about these moments of real clarity around, I've got surveys, but that might not be enough. When did you realize that you needed more than that?
So CX is also a really top priority for us at Vanguard, and we're committed to really leaning in and making sure that we're optimizing our experiences for our clients. And now there's technology that allows us to go beyond just the surveys. So with digital insights, we're able to see things through heat maps and session replays and path analysis that we hadn't been able to see before. And that's exactly what our clients were doing on our web experiences. And that's really been tremendously helpful in allowing us to understand the root cause of why maybe a client is engaging with a call to action or finding important information on our website that we hope that they would. And so not only did this help us optimize our pages, but we were able to experiment with new designs, and it's really driven much more positive business outcomes.
That's great. What I love about that is what you were focusing on was behaviors that they were telling you, but not words that they were telling you.
Exactly.
Things that you could pick up without actually hearing from them, and then using that to drive your actioning. So powerful there. I think, Samantha, you're bringing a little different lens to this, and that is, when did you realize that what you really needed to do to sort of finish this off was activate with your employees?
Yeah, so I started leading just the customer experience team about 3 years ago. And at the time, my team was hyper-focused on making sure that we were modernizing our insights program, bringing it up to industry standards. It had kind of fallen by the wayside at one point. So Natalie, who was in the audience, did an amazing job with that. But we started looking and really peeling away at the different things that customers were telling us. And customers don't speak our language. They don't. Like in Verizon, we have a very specific way of speaking. I'm sure a lot of big companies that are sitting in the audience probably know exactly what I'm talking about. You have your internal jargon, but customers don't speak Verizon, right? So when they are telling us something like, my bill is never correct, this never works for me, we really could activate our voice of the employee program that at the time was sitting in a different organization. We've since brought them under our same umbrella, and allow us to dig a little bit deeper on what my bill is never right actually means. That can be so layered, right? It could mean that you had an employee that traveled internationally and didn't alert the account administrator, so they didn't have the right feature. or maybe there was an additional requirement for a promo to be applied, or something along those lines. It could be a lot of different things, but by working closely with our Voice of the Employee program and then eventually bringing them in and being more connected, we could get much deeper and really truly understand what the customers are telling us, and then in turn act far more quickly on prioritizing a solution and then making something better on behalf of the customers.
And your voice of your employee is not that just traditional. How do you like working here?
Oh, no.
It's so much more powerful the way you're leveraging it, because it helps them also understand how what they're doing impacts the overall experience. And the boots on the ground are really the most powerful voice about where those friction points are, where the pain points are, and the best ideas about the solutioning.
100%, because they're in it every single day. So they can tell you exactly a recommendation, something that's broken, something that's outdated, and you get really robust feedback from the team.
So was this kind of a light bulb type of moment when you realized what you were doing at the time wasn't enough, or was it more of a slow build for any of you?
For me, it was truly a light bulb. Once we brought the team under our umbrella, the unlock that we felt, and really being able to understand exactly what customers were telling us in their language, but translated to Verizon, it was so beneficial.
Anybody else? Slow build up or light bulb?
I think it was a light bulb, but it had been a slow build.
A little bit of both.
Absolutely. And it was a multi-year transformation to get to the point where we are today.
Yeah, none of this happens overnight. It's just
Absolutely.
that I think the next sort of thing is we talk a lot with organizations who say that they are data rich, maybe are able to pull some insights, but aren't quite at a spot where the actioning becomes that natural next step. And I think laying the foundation of having everybody understand how their role in their work impacts that overall experience, it's a key moment that you need to have your organization at in order to get to that actioning. So as you're thinking about that, Aimee, when did this move from being just interesting stuff to the data that you were leveraging to drive that overall actioning?
So prior to us having digital insights, our CX experts, some of which are in the audience here today, really struggled, like I said, to understand what clients were doing on our experiences. But they also had a really difficult time conveying to our leadership team when we needed to make improvements. They couldn't explain why that was the case. And so now with having these insights that can be visualized, everybody is able to really clearly see the opportunity areas. The adage that a picture tells 1,000 words really describes what it's like to work with this information. The teams always have this aha moment. And so not only have these insights unlocked business results, but they've really helped to build trust and credibility that our leaders have in our UX team, and that we're making data-driven decisions.
Data-driven decisions that will ultimately deliver that business value.
Exactly, yep.
So Samantha, once you got to the point that you realized the power that you had by pulling in those employee signals as well as your customer signals, you talked a little bit about some organizational change internally. What did you have to do internally so that you could begin to action?
Well, honestly, the first thing that we did is we found out that we needed to make a true cultural shift across Verizon Business. And in order to do that, we needed to make sure that everyone knew that CX is part of your job. And so we launched an Experience Hero program, and that was a phased approach of awareness of CX, enablement of CX, over to employee activation around customer experience. And the first component of that is we did a quarterly CX training, very foundational, making sure that everyone knows that CX isn't just about surveys, it's about delivering on an experience that we can be proud of. And that was a required training for the entire organization, not just the sales and service teams, finance, marketing, our technical teams. everyone needed to know that the work that you do on a daily basis eventually produces something that your customer will see, and that is a very important responsibility. So we started with the training. We actually created little badges that you can put on your internal profile. So if you look me up on my internal profile, it says I'm a CX hero. But we have different ones, like we have Caught in the Act badge, where we can recognize people that have been found delivering a really positive experience. And by doing that phased approach, we've really seen a true cultural shift happening in the organization. And people that don't interact with customers in their normal day-to-day are now proactively bringing it up when we're doing a new product launch or discussing a new promo concept. You hear people that would have never done this before raising their hand and asking, well, how will this present to the customer? And how will this look and feel to them when they are turning it on or trying to make a change or something along those lines? And that has been like truly the most empowering moment, I think.
And impactful. Just the
Absolutely.
fact that people that's part of the dialogue. It's part of their consideration. It's part of how they're thinking about it through that outside in look versus inside out. And me and my organization and my silo, that everybody understands we're all in service of our customers.
100%, yeah.
That's incredible. And I know, Stephanie, we talked about having CX in a team and having a group of people being really passionate about it. How do you move it outside of the CX team to be a true team sport across the company? What were your learnings? What steps did you all take?
Yeah, to align an entire organization around CX was absolutely a journey. And it started with getting crystal clear on where we wanted to win and where we wanted to compete. And so armed with now a shared purpose, as well as a view of what success looked like, we actually partnered with Medallia at that point to say, we need to assess our CX maturity. We need to understand from a CX team perspective, what's our unique contribution and how do we bring that to life? And so we worked with all of our lines of business partners who our CX team support, as well as Medallia, and we built an enterprise CX strategy and roadmap. And over the next 3 years, we focused on first building a robust client sentiment data ecosystem within Medallia. And that involved bringing key client signals around sentiment from many different sources into one platform, so that we could really understand relevant, contextualized, timely insights to help inform strategic decisions. But a key step was connecting that platform with our CRM tools, with our data lakes, so that we could actually do something with that and truly affect change. And that helped build an understanding of our client beyond transactional and behavioral data. Now we were layering in that sentiment, and you're able to infer so much, right? Silent signals as well as active ones, and really derive and interpret what the client is telling us, what they need, what are those moments that matter, and that really was the catalyst to being able to help bring all of that to life. We also made a point of staying really close with our lines of business, other modernization initiatives. And that was really important because leaders started to see CX as an enabler. They started to be able to envision, okay, these client insights, they go beyond that transactional and behavioral. I can actually do something to act quickly, to inform next best action. And all of that really unlocked our ability to personalize experiences at scale. When I look back, that was a transition point where people started to look at the CX team differently. No longer were we seen as the survey shop or the CX shop. We were actually seen as business leaders and trusted advisors who were using insights strategically to help inform decisions. That transition happened when we stopped speaking only in the language of CX and started speaking our partners' language of value for the business.
Yeah, incredible impact there as well. When you start to become that deep well of data and information and insights that people know they need in order to prioritize their business decisions, then you're unstoppable. That's incredible. I think as we look around the room, and as I've talked with a number of our clients, and you've had conversations as well with people throughout your time here, a lot of people are at different points in this journey. So where we started with you understanding that surveys were only a part of the picture, that you didn't have your employee experience married up into this yet. You needed to get that entire organizational alignment going. What would you say from a being stuck in this kind of insights to action piece, what did you put in place, Stephanie, so that CX became your overall system, not just the one-time win? And I hope this is okay to say this because I do know a little bit about CIBC, but you had an outgoing CEO, you're getting a new CEO, and your new CEO, almost out of the gate, reiterated, underscored, and said, we are going to be the most customer-led, client-led company out there. So with that, and as you're thinking about that overall, if you were stuck or when you were stuck, what sort of advice would you give?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. In order to make it repeatable, you have to really build CX into everything you do, into how you operate. And we implemented 3 governance tactics that I think really made all the difference. The first thing we did is we actually built CX into our enterprise delivery framework. That ensures that day one on every project, CX is at the table. And we're using our outside-in lens and our view of the client to help inform solution design, to help spot client risks early, and make sure that the client's voice is heard throughout. That is absolutely pivotal. But in order to make it consistent and build in accountability, we actually made it a formal gate for funding. Projects do not get funded unless they complete this client experience assessment. We get to be at the table, and we're actually evaluating client risk. So that's pretty powerful. The second thing we did is we actually built a human-centered design practice right within our CX team. That, again, keeps the client at the center and them as that filter for all of our decisioning. In addition, we actually developed what we call a dress rehearsal process. We bring 25 leaders from across the organization together, and we stress test the client experience. It's such a powerful way not only to ensure we're checking that we're operationally ready for a launch, a new product, a new service, but that we're anticipating surprises and we're delivering what's right for the client. The third thing that we do is we actually interlock our CX strategy with all of our product and channel partner roadmaps every year. This makes sure that not only are we aligned in our priorities, but we're synchronizing our efforts. So there's none of those competing objectives happening. And it really reinforces the working as one enterprise to deliver growth. It's this type of operational focus and governance models that I think really builds this repeatable system that I actually think is a differentiator for us.
A differentiator and a bottom line mover. So over to you, Samantha. We talked about the CX hero piece. What became different for your frontline org once they realized how impactful and how important they were in delivering the experience from the data stories, from the training, from everything that you were doing? What did you see different in your frontline employees?
Well, I can tell you when we started, I mean, Verizon is a massive organization, and we have a lot of, I started my intro with, I've been with Verizon for 15 years, but that's mid-tenure at Verizon. Most of my peers are 20 plus years. My boss is approaching 30 years at the company, and that's normal. Like, it's absolutely normal for that to be the case. But when you're trying to make this level of a cultural shift, you feel like you're trying to move the Titanic, right? But what we saw across time is people were completing the trainings and they were adding the badges to their profile and all of the gamification that goes along with it. We saw a lot of proactive employee feedback coming into every process that we were doing on a day-to-day basis. And so employees were raising their hands saying, have we thought about this? Can we do this a little bit differently? Can we make sure that this works at the point of activation, whatever the case may be? But when you have that and the employee actually feels like their voice is being heard, that they are part of the process, they are far more engaged. And we all know that a more engaged employee is more likely to be retained and more likely to have like a higher ENPS as well. But it's really important to make sure that not only the employee has an opportunity to have their voice heard, but like truly be part of the process as well.
So great and so powerful. And I love that you tie that back to the retention piece and the long tenure, because when you think about business impact from that, acquisition costs of new employees and onboarding and recruiting, all of that helps to settle that and get you to a place where people not only identify with how great they're doing on behalf of your clients, but they're really proud to be an employee of your organization. True business impact there. I think we talked a little bit too about when did you realize that your CX efforts were actually driving results that the business cared about?
Well, I think it was, we kind of hit on it earlier, but for our stakeholders, what really resonated with them is the business outcomes that we've been able to achieve since we've been using new technology. And it really, an example of that is when we were able to pinpoint and address an issue with why we weren't converting sales leads. And with this information that we now have access to, we were able to really get to the root cause and diagnose what's happening, use that information as insight into improving our experiences, and now we're seeing double the amount of sales leads from our website. And so that's just one example, but there's many examples like that. But examples like that are really reassuring our leaders that this focus on CX is really moving the dial towards our business outcomes.
And I think all three of you did a really nice job talking about CX speak it's great, it's important, it's the way we all communicate with each other, but it's not the way we communicate with our business stakeholders. And I think that's been one real clear theme in everything that you said is in order to get that buy-in, in order to get that connective tissue where you need it to be, you have to start to talk like that. So when I started, before I introed you all, I said that you were going to share some of your experiences and some of your insights and sort of talk about your journey in a way that maybe there are some things you didn't do that you wish you would have. So if you could go back to your 2 to 3 years ago person and say, get on this right away, what's one thing you wish you would have done sooner?
I would say prioritize progress over perfection and start where you can make an impact. If I think back, it's so easy to get caught up in wanting to wait until everything's flawless before you act or before you move. But it's really momentum that matters. So that, for me, is the biggest learning. So even if you can move the needle a bit, even if those first few steps aren't perfect, you'll actually build confidence and maybe earn the right to do a little bit more. I think the other thing I do is I'd identify a group of allies early on, leaders that are willing to start small, test, experiment, maybe not even be afraid to fail fast. Again, it's those early wins that will open up other doors for bigger opportunities. And I think that started for us when we stopped speaking only in CX language or in terms of CX metrics, but we actually started to speak as business leaders and speaking our partners' language. That's what really earned us a seat at the table and allowed us the opportunity to influence meaningful change.
Yeah. How about you, Aimee?
Similar to Stephanie, I really think that a mindset shift for CX that needs to happen is moving away from the pursuit of perfection and to a culture of continuous improvement. And so if I was to go back 2 to 3 years, I think I would be much more of a champion and advocate for experimentation. And especially today, we have so many tools at our disposal that allow us to see what's happening, that allow us to iterate and improve and really adapt to the changing needs of our customers.
Yeah, that's great. How about you?
I hate to be repetitive, but I would say, I would tell myself to be bold and to normalize failure as a moment to learn. It can be very scary to explore things that you've never tried before, but at the same time, if you find something on the other end that you just would have never considered had you not done it. Like, how rewarding is that? And honestly, the moments of failure are okay too. Take stock of what you learned from that moment. Is there anything that worked out of it? And then if there was, maybe you can incorporate it into something else that might work down the line. But I would encourage my former self to just be bold and to try new things.
Yeah, knowing what you know now, which
Right.
is some really incredible work that you've all delivered. True examples of the best of clients that we work with. Very well-deserved recipients of our Expy Awards. A great big congratulations to all three of you again. Really appreciate you sharing your insights, your experience, your learnings, your knowledge with all of us. Please help me in thanking these incredible women for these great stories. And with that, we are going to shift gears a little bit, and I am going to welcome Sid Banerjee back to the stage, who is going to spend some time talking to our Customer Experience Leader Award of the Year with Paloma Paraja. So Sid and Paloma, welcome back.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I enjoyed dancing with some of you late last night. Maybe we'll do some more dancing tomorrow. I am very pleased to welcome Paloma Paraja to the stage. Paloma is a customer experience manager for Santalucia Seguros in Spain. And she was basically, well, not she, the company was awarded the Expy Award for Experience Transformation. And I would love to take the next few minutes, 20 minutes or so, to really talk about how that program was conceived, how it was developed, and really how you've developed good value realization and ROI from that solution. What I can start with, if you don't mind, I'm going to get my notes up here, is maybe if you could, Paloma, first of all, just tell us a little bit about, first about yourself, and then where you started. I understand that you had kind of traditional CX programs and a desire to kind of evolve the program. If you could tell us a little bit about your story.
Yes, when I arrived to Santalucia 3 years ago, I think more or less, we had a very solid service system, I think as many of you still have today. We rely heavily on NPS. I have nothing against NPS, at least not much more, but I think
Nor do I.
It deserves its own debate. But we had two big problems: timing and the lack of context. Timing, because usually when you send a survey, you wait until an interaction or a process finish, and then you ask, how did it go? So if something went wrong during this process, you are missing the opportunity to change the outcome. Right. So we were just measuring the satisfaction, but we were doing nothing to prevent it. And in the insurance sector as us, this is a huge problem, because behind any customer's interaction, there is a moment of truth with a huge emotional charge, as leaking, fire, the loss of someone you love, a health problem. So missing this time for acting was a big problem. And also, on the other hand, we were lacked of context. We were sharing NPS reports, but these are just numbers. So trying to get teams involved by sharing them numbers is something almost impossible. Don't waste your time to try to do it, because it's not going to work. So we realized, and we took a moment for doing something that is very simple, but we forget sometimes in our account day-to-day, which is putting really on our customer shoes and thinking, what would I prefer if I was living the situation? And we realized, at me and maybe many of you, if I will be passing through one of those complicated situations, damaging my home to my family or whatever happens, I will make sure that the company knows it. Maybe through the phone, maybe texting, maybe shouting or not, doesn't matter, but you will do it.
Yes.
And we realized that customers were telling already us everything we needed to know, but we were not listening. And that was I think, the thought that made the big change.
Yeah, I know, and we should probably tell, for those of you who don't know the kind of industry that, that Santalucia is in, it's an insurance company. And insurance, for those of us who've ever had to file a claim or deal with anything, it is a very personal business. So there is a lot of storytelling from your customers, a lot of emotion, understanding really those drivers and how to handle that. I think that empathy at scale is a very important part of your role when you're supporting those customers.
And you spend many time paying for almost nothing, so when it happens, you expect a good response.
That makes a ton of sense. Switching to a different topic, but I mean, obviously connected to the transformation, it's not uncommon in organizations, particularly for CX leaders, that it's not just about technology adoption, it's really about organizational alignment, right? Getting everybody in the organization to say, we don't want to just look at a score, we want to do more. There's decision making, there may be different opinions, there may be bureaucracy. How did you manage that? And there's also ownership, right? Who owns the data, who owns the systems? How did you manage that kind of outreach and kind of process of convincing people to try something new?
I think it was maybe our biggest challenge. We are a 100-year-old company, and everything has been created like progressively, but in a very fragmented way.
Yep.
All our systems and even the teams that work on them are not prepared to speak to another.
Sure.
And they work in that way. So breaking these silos was a big challenge. And we started by forgetting NPS scores and this kind of reports and starting to speak their own language by bringing Medallia information from our internal systems and operational data. So we are not just mapping different interactions, but linked to each one of these interactions, we bring very powerful information. For example, in a home repair, we know who the claim handler was, which repair technicians were involved, how long took them to finish his work, how much cost the repair for us, and we bring also many information about the customer itself to better understand. We connect this data with the information we still have in Medallia from all the different interactions, like to better understand the whole picture of the customer. And by doing that, they started to understand what we were saying to them.
Sure.
Not just numbers,
right,
but realities and customer stories. We were not just sharing more, this is what customer is saying, but this is what's happening in your service and your processes, and this is how it's impacting customers.
What is the kind of the cadence? Are you meeting with the business on a regular basis? Are you sharing reports? Is it a collaborative approach in terms of
Yes. In fact, we have, in a way, end of sharing reports and their own teams access to Medallia.
Okay.
They are heavy
so
users.
they're getting access to it
yes,
directly.
and they have their own reports with the information they need to see it at the moment they need, and they are daily entering Medallia and using the information. We don't need to share them and to collect.
So they can self-service if they
Yes,
need. Okay.
And this was fantastic because at the beginning, and I think in many CX teams this happened, you have to be behind the people saying, we need to change this, we have a problem here, we need to work. And nowadays, the other teams in the company are asking us for make new projects and to get into new initiatives to improve customer experience.
Very good. And I want to maybe just describe a little bit of the architecture of what you're doing today. So with Medallia, you're bringing in calls, you're bringing in digital sessions from the DXA, you're bringing in obviously surveys, you're also bringing in social comments, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. How? Tell us a little bit about that architecture. So how did you build it, and sort of how does it get used today from a process perspective?
The first step was completing surveys because they were stabilized. So we decided to move the context and to make it a little bit more understandable. Then we started with social, which was maybe the easiest to implement because of the connectors. in social, you need to spend many time by learning what you're receiving and kind of cleaning.
It's noisy, yes. Social
Yes,
can be noisy.
but
Yeah.
when you clean all this noise, you start finding some
Right.
insights that are very valuable. And then we start with a speech. We made it through a small connection at the beginning with 1,000 calls per day. Now
Okay.
we are listening 100% of them.
100% of calls.
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Yep.
Then we move into the digital world to better understand behavior. But all this happened because we were convincing the teams and our CEO and our structure that every step we were making had a value. So we do it progressively. It took us 2 years, not too much.
Okay.
but we were like showing results in any step with it, and then finding a use case for the next one with very or high impact in business, deploying it, and then evolving to the whole.
Good. And at this point, you are, I mean, very much, this is the definition of a truly omnichannel CX
Yes,
solution.
of
Not
course.
just bringing in surveys, but bringing in all of the omnichannel content and insights.
Yes.
Yeah. And I want to bring it back to some of the conversations we had yesterday around driving efficiencies, driving value. How do you measure success? What do you, when you look back at, were you able to kind of improve quality or decrease cost or drive more efficiency? Is that a big part of how you kind of justify the value going forward, or?
Of course, we have KPIs and we
Sure.
have to measure them. Of course, we need to continue measuring NPS. We
Yep.
have increased more than 10 points since we met you.
10%, yeah, 10 points,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
But this is just to reflect of what we are doing.
Sure.
That is actioning everything we are listening. Nowadays, the last year, and it was an increasing one, we have listened to more than 1.6 million calls,
Okay.
1.2 million digital sessions through DXA, and 115 surveys, which is with their comments, text comments. So
Yep.
this is all about unstructured feedback.
Okay.
It's the only way of truly understanding. But I think that what really makes the change and how we measure is by the action. We don't follow too much these numbers, but we always have an eye on how many alerts we are closing on time. We are now on a 98%, which means within 48 hours. This is our most important KPI.
Okay.
But we also are achieving all the things with teams that are really involved. For example, we are recovering 1 out of 4 policies more or less after a cancellation because we detect it.
Right.
Through survey, through a call, through wherever. We're avoiding 54%, I think, of churn risk that we detect over all these patterns.
So you're predicting, or at least capturing it before the event happens.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And by aggregating thousands and millions of these interactions is where we can find patterns that help us to move forward the organization.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I think I wanted, you and I were talking before the session about the fact that you are very much linking CX and EX together. Can you talk a little bit about how that works in the context of this program?
Yes. In fact, we have Medallia for both programs,
Okay,
which
okay.
will help us a lot
Sure.
to implement it. Nowadays, the first approach we have done to this, it's through the contact center, because we are analyzing 100% of the calls, and obviously we know the agent behind
Sure.
each call. So, and after the call, we made a survey to the customer and we asked him how it was. So we are starting to see that it's a reality with numbers and with percentage that the employee experience is affecting the customer experience.
Sure.
But we are now very focused on extending this to the whole organization, because it's very easy to imagine how the experience of a person that is in front of the customers directly influencing customer experience. But there are many other teams behind the scenes that also have an impact.
Right.
So with our EX program, we are constantly measuring the temperature of the experience for the whole organization,
Right.
both in front of the customer or not. And we have the idea of kind of measuring this impact in the complete customer journey with all the teams involved in each part of the process and how it's affecting the customer experience.
Yeah, I think this is, to me, a very powerful kind of observation, because in a lot of organizations we think about, well, how is the employee that's serving the customer, the employee on the phone, the employee in the office? But that employee is only as good as all of the employees behind the curtain that are basically allowing that employee to do the job. So the feedback of everyone in that, almost think of it as an organizational supply chain, is as important as the feedback from that customer-facing employee.
Yes.
And I think you've done a very good job of trying to understand how each of those employees affects the value and the efficiency and the emotional state of the employees that ultimately
Absolutely,
touch the customer. Yeah.
Because in fact, the employees that are in front of the customer, they are just like translating the message.
Right.
But all this message is done by many other people that is behind.
Exactly. Fantastic. We have a couple minutes left. Maybe if I could look at a kind of a forward forecast. What do you foresee? What do you predict how this program might continue to evolve, and maybe what might be coming in the future?
Well, first, this big focus on joining EX and CX world and making like a kind of unique voice through the whole company. But we are also very focused on predictability and proactivity, because now we have enough information from unstructured feedback to do that. We want to be able to resize our contact center teams depending on demand, also our provider networks, and to communicating proactively customers with some advice when we detect the first thing of something that is going to happen.
Right.
So we are starting to work on this. We have made the first steps, especially on the providers network, because it's something that really has big impact on customer experience, of course.
Right.
But I think the future will bring us for this.
Yes. So it's predicting and proactively communicating. That makes
Yes.
a lot of sense. All right. I guess my last question is sort of a similar question we've asked other people, but advice, right? What advice should you give to people who might be saying, I like what you're doing at Santalucia. How do I build a program like this?
Well, I think that the first one, I've said it before many times, and you said it too in
Sure.
communications, but unstructured feedback is the only way of truly understanding. It's very important to know that, and to don't waste time thinking if it should be important or not, or how to implement it. Yes, try it, maybe with little showcase or pilots, but try it, because you will find a gold mine with that.
Perfect.
Another big learning is that leadership trust should be shown through tangible changes,
Right.
not slides. You need to show the whole organization that insight can move and change a lot about operations, economics, and customer lives. Maybe another one is that context brings empathy.
Sure.
And when you're able to understand everything that is behind the scenes, you can connect better with other teams, other people in your organization, of course with the customers. But when you start to see it, the actions comes alone. It's like obvious.
Fantastic.
And the last one is that listening is not a project or something very technological. It's a discipline. It's a daily habit that you have to take in every decision that is made in a company.
Listening is discipline. My wife tells me that all the time. I need to do a better job of listening. By the way, I called my wife last night and told her, you are like a main part of my presentations the last 2 days. She loves it. She loves it. Anyway. All right. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you. And I might just end. I was reading the submission for your award, and if you don't mind, I just want to read some of the outcomes here. So you touched on some of these. Your program had produced a 10-point increase in NPS, a success rate of triggered alert resolution of over 60% on tens of thousands of alerts a year, identifying threats, right? Complaints, churn, et cetera. So that's a key use case of what you're doing. And then also trying to understand how to recover policies, right? You're using this to sort of make sure, even if something does go to cancellation, you look for ways to kind of proactively recover those. So there's really good business outcomes that you've really focused this program on. It's not just about listening. Obviously, empathy is a big part of this, but empathy gives you understanding. Understanding helps you make decisions and
Absolutely.
do better things. And it's just a fantastic use case. Congratulations on the award. And again, thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you so
good.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we are done with the morning mainstays sessions. I would encourage all of you to attend the further breakouts. There's more customer meetings. There's more product and technology overviews. 4:15, please come back here for a great keynote from Allison Levine. And then this evening, more dancing. So enjoy your day. Thank you very much. All right.